Okay, Jonathan Martinez versus David Nunes here.
I recognize David Nunes. He placed second in Toronto playing Amethyst Steel, I believe, and based on the mulligan, it looks like he's on that as well. I believe Jonathan is also on Ruby Sapphire. So interesting list here. Amethyst Steel really sort of really gaining popularity this set.
Let me ask you a question, right? So we have Ruby Amethyst as sort of our top, I would say, Amethyst deck, and that's not really up for dispute. Why would you play Amethyst Steel? What does it offer you that Ruby Amethyst doesn't?
So we were talking earlier about, what meta are you hoping for if you're a Ruby Sapphire player? And I think the meta that is given is a more aggressive one. The Amber Steel Mines deck is a lot more aggressive. Even Ruby Amethyst can be a bit more aggressive as well. I think Amethyst Steel gives you those steel removal options that are a little bit easier to counter those more aggressive decks that come out with super explosive openings like daisies and stuff versus Ruby Amethyst, which can be a little bit slower.
Yeah, and I feel like Amethyst Steel actually used to be the more aggressive version of an Amethyst deck versus Ruby Amethyst. That paradigm sort of shifted when the Flynn Sisu line came, but you're absolutely right. Having access to that steel removal can help you in those more aggressive-oriented matchups. But we do see an aggressive start here with Diablo into Mr. Smee. So 3 quests liable on the board. We'll see how Jonathan responds. Jonathan with that amazing new card. It's going to go into the Inkwell. We're going to sail into the Azurite Sea.
Choose to ink sail so that we can play Tipo. Super important thing for Ruby Sapphire here to get that turn 2 ramp, getting another card into your Inkwell so that you can ramp towards those more expensive cards like Sisu Empowered Sibling, board wipes essentially to gain control, also allowing you to potentially play a Hiram on turn 3, Hyrule Flaversham if you have it in hand. But one interesting thing about these Amethyst Steel matchups that I find is they can be a bit aggressive, but a lot of their characters have like 3 strength or 4 strength, especially as you get into these 2, 3, 4 cost characters that make some of the Ruby removal a little bit less good.
Yeah, so we started at the cast talking down on Ruby Sapphire a bit, but what I will say is that this is definitely one of the best decks in the game. It's also got quite a bit of upgrades in the new set. It's so much more consistent on that ramp on turn 2, but I think it's the sort of the change in its win condition away from Lucky Dime has made this deck so much better and so much more consistent.
Very eager to see if Jonathan even has any Lucky Dimes in hand. I see the Maui Half Shark in hand. I know a lot of people are leaning more towards that, playing some Pirate's Lives. We see it Be Prepared in hand. Just Maui being able to bring those actions back from the discard can be a super powerful thing. A lot of times people have just given up on the dime. It's a little bit too slow in this metagame, so eager to see if we find that. But it does look like Jonathan is going to ink. We're going to challenge this Diablo with our Tipo. It looks like we played How Far I'll Go for the turn, allowing Jonathan to look at the top 2 cards of his deck, put one into his Inkwell, and then the other into his hand before passing the turn back to David.
Yeah, so Jonathan does find the Popsicle critically before that we did have our turn 2 ramp, but we're missing some of the other pieces, right? We didn't have the item as well as didn't have the Hiram for that draw engine. So Jonathan, while having that critical turn 2 ramp, didn't really have an ideal start so far. David, starting to pull a little bit ahead, but that's what this Ruby Sapphire deck does, is it tends to fall behind in the early game and then pulls ahead later with these sort of high value, high cost cards.
I'm sure David is understanding of this as well. I think David has to know that he can't win the attrition game, right? Especially as the Amethyst Steel player. One of the things I love the most about an Amethyst Steel deck is you can play more aggressive, or you can play a little bit more towards your mid game with bouncing your Mims and Merlins, like this Merlin Rabbit we see in play. But against the Ruby Sapphire deck, I think you have to go as fast as you can, trying to end the game quickly. We do see Jonathan playing him out of Medusa there to banish the Rabbit, allowing David to draw a card, and then we're also going to banish the Smee with that last bit of damage needed to be done by Tipo there before passing the turn, and now Jonathan has the board.
Yep, and quickly with a 4/4 Madame Medusa sitting here on board. Hard for David to deal with, but David has a full grip in hand, has access to Amethyst for a lot of card draw as well. We know Jonathan has the Popsicle in hand, so we'll be able to draw, but critically doesn't have that Hiram quite yet, so it could potentially run out of grass. While you can never attrition out Ruby Sapphire in the long game, sometimes in the early to mid game, they can stumble, can not find that draw engine, and sometimes you can see Amethyst decks actually attrition them out. It's sort of a hybrid mid-range attrition game plan, but you can out-card advantage them with things like that Rabbit, the bounce package, and things like Friends on the other side.
It's one of the things that I appreciate most about an Amethyst Steel deck specifically is a lot of these more aggressive decks, like Amber Steel, for instance, you can play out your hand really quickly, but if you don't have a way if you either don't win the game early or have a way to recover through cards like Doc or Rapunzel to draw you more cards, you can kind of just run out of gas, like you said. But Amethyst, of course, has a plethora of cards available to them to not only draw them cards, but sort of replace themselves, right? The Diablo that was played replaced itself. The Rabbit that was played got more than just replaced itself, drew 2 cards by the end of that. So it makes it really easy for David to continue to put pressure on sort of as the game moves on.
Kind of answers potentially David has in hand. We see access to Turner Box followers as a way to potentially draw more cards. The CT5 cost Elsa there as well. We're going to see our first GOAT of the game. One of the most powerful cards in any of these Amethyst lists. We've already seen its power on display so far today. Turner Box followers as well followed up. So 4-drop, 1-drop. Back onto the board here for David.
I love this play by David here because it sort of gets around the Lady Tremaine line. Lady Tremaine's sort of were a little less popular in the past couple metas, but I've seen them being played a little bit more in some of these Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire lists as well. So having that Turner Box followers there gives you an opportunity to banish something other than your Merlin Goat that you're probably wanting to bounce to hand. But Jonathan is going to play that Popsicle, drawing a card, and we do see the Maui Half Shark being played for the first time. That's going to allow Jonathan, if the Maui Shark can challenge and banish a character, to pull an action card from his discard and replay it.
Yeah, which is a super, super powerful engine. This is a new card, of course, that has made its way into all of these Ruby Sapphire decks. Often as a 3 of, sometimes as a 4 of as well. Just such a big shift in terms of how this deck was built.
Another thing that I love about Maui Half Shark is that he is evasive, and I'm sure we will see the phenomenal cosmic power of Genie later in these Amethyst lists, sort of taking over the Amethyst ink entirely this set. We haven't seen it yet, but Maui can be a great counter to Genie. Being in play, being a 2-quester, evasive character can be difficult.
Yeah, I feel like the theme of set 6 is almost centered around evasives, mostly because Genie is so powerful, but we see responses in the metagame with things like Maui Shark as well. I mean, these Amethyst decks are, these Amethyst derivatives that are running as evasive characters. This has been happening since set 1.
Oh my gosh, we see a second Maui Half Shark being played. That's going to be sort of brutal. Jonathan doesn't particularly have a lot of actions in the discard to make use of, but Jonathan is gripping a pretty expensive hand here. I think there's a Sisu and maybe another Maui Half Shark in hand next to a Be Prepared. Certainly don't want to be prepared this board if we can avoid it, but does give us the ability to potentially start questing with these Maui Sharks. Again, with them being evasive, makes them pretty safe, especially with this Tinkerbell Giant Fairy being in play by David. You don't want to give your opponent the opportunity to challenge with that Tinkerbell to deal 2 damage to any of your other characters if she can banish a character in a challenge. Eager to see how David responds to this. Yeah,
Jonathan hasn't drawn too many cards, but I feel like David is just in a really rough spot on board just because of these 7-5 stat lines. Like, how do you deal with that as an Amethyst deck? I mean, of course, you're playing Steel, so you have access to things like, potentially, and then along came Zeus. We see the strength of a Raging Fire there, able to take out that Maui with a single damage counter on it. But it's a very menacing sort of stat line to deal with, this 7-5, especially when there's a Popsicle on board to potentially heal it up.
Yeah, you can't leave damage on it. Wouldn't be surprised if there were some Along Came Zeuses in the deck. I don't see any in David's hand. Unfortunately, we don't have any evasive characters either. Otherwise, that Crab might be helpful. If we can get up to an ink count where we can play both this Crab and the Elsa. Elsa is evasive, could exert the Maui Half Shark if Jonathan decides to keep it readied and banish it with the pump up that Merlin Crab would give the Elsa to rush in.
Imagine having to go through that much work just to deal with this card that is just a part of a win condition, right? It's not even supposed to be that powerful in and of itself, and you're sort of almost 2-for-1ing yourself to try to get rid of it. We see our first Popsicle banished, and another one here played off the back of that. Hiram has it, the board. It feels like Jonathan is starting to run away with this game, has assembled board dominance, and has now gotten access to the card draw engine as well.
Yeah, David's sort of in a locked state right now, I think, where you don't really want to quest with any of your characters, primarily because you don't want this Half Shark to challenge anything. Even though there's not many actions in Jonathan's discard, there is that How Far I'll Go, which is a great song for Maui to sing, if you want to you don't want to spend the ink on that card, but let Jonathan dig deeper into his deck to find those Hiram Flaversham's, the other few pieces that he's missing to really take control of this deck.
Yeah, and we talk about the difference between the Amethyst Steel and Ruby Amethyst. I mean, I think the late game Ruby Sapphire is going to be particularly hard for Amethyst Steel to deal with because they really can't do anything about Tamatoa. They can't even, play one, be prepared to 1-for-1 at Tamato. Once that Tamato hits the board, I feel like Jonathan's going to have this game locked up unless David's very, very far ahead in terms of lore.
You don't even need a card like Lucky Dime, which has been so powerful in the past couple sets because of that reason. David can go as wide as he wants to, but Jonathan, as we continue to see him develop this board, it just gets wider and wider with more and more threats. We saw the Hiram Flaversham being played, so now Jonathan has one of the strongest card draw engines in the game. Hiram being able to banish banish an item card when he enters play and draw 2 cards off of it. And when he quests, he can do the same thing. See David exerting and banishing that questing with the Turnabox followers. And banishing it to draw another card, just trying to find answers. We can see him doing some calculations, trying to figure out what he needs to do to get back into this game. Only up to 8 lore. That's certainly not where I want to be in this position because it means you have a long way to go to 20.
This looks like we're going to exert the Hiram here with the Elsa. Crab comes down. Elsa into the shark. It's crazy that you just have to get rid of that shark because it's so scary with that half Argo sitting in the discard, just being able to get that back.
But we see the power of Elsa the Fifth Spirit here, being able to come in, break this lock that Jonathan had David in, essentially exerting the Maui Half Shark, allowing the Elsa to challenge and banish it, and then now letting Tinkerbell challenge and deal damage to the other cards like the Hiram Flaversham with, I think the Merlin Goat was the one that challenged into it. So
you see it be prepared here potentially.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, this is how Ruby Sapphire really takes over a game. It takes so much work to get them off of those powerful characters and off of a powerful board state. You finally recover, build something up, and then they just slam the Be Prepared right after.
And it looks like David here, just 2 cards in hand. That's the perfect card to draw there. We see the Merlin Rabbit coming to draw another. We find a Diablo and a Turnerbox followers, both of which will likely replace themselves. David drawing pretty hot here as we enter the mid game. Over to Jonathan. Jonathan does need to find something.
Oh, that's going to be brutal. Jonathan's going to play a Sisu empowered sibling. It's going to banish all characters on David's side of the board with 2 or less strength. Fortunately, like you mentioned, this Merlin Rabbit will draw a card when banished, and so will the Diablo. So David, having no cards in hand last turn, is going to start this turn with 3 cards in hand after drawing per turn. We do find the Genie finally entering play. Evasive, 2 lore, 4 willpower, lets you draw a card when it enters play. David just continues to cycle through his deck, playing card after card after card, pushing to 20.
Jonathan did also draw Hiram Flaversham on the previous turn, which must have been one of the better draws he could have had, getting access to more card draw. That being said, David is putting the pressure on, and Jonathan needs to answer quickly. It's really funny to me, Brandon, when people say that Ruby Amethyst or something Amethyst it's a fair deck. It does fair things. There's nothing fair about drawing this many cards.
Yeah, I mean, David multiple times has been on such a low hand, almost, 0 cards many times, and it's just you just top deck the Rabbit or top deck the Genie, whatever you need to. And even when you are top decking cards that aren't drawing you cards immediately, half of the cards that are in play will draw you cards as soon as they're banished. But very quickly, the tides have turned here. We see Jonathan, after having played that Sisu, this turn is played the Sisu to banish the Genie, making sure that he doesn't start questing away, getting too far ahead, and then also had that Hiram to follow it up, bringing us back to another powerful draw engine here. David going to trade with the Sisu with the Goat to get that off the board, gaining a lore when the Goat leaves play, ensuring that Jonathan can't get closer to 20 with that 3 lore that he could use with Sisu to quest with.
Has access to Diablo, Magic, Broom. This is actually a very, very tight game.
I think this is where we see the power of Amethyst, right? Like, you're just able to be super consistent, continue to refill your hand. You have access to so many cards that eventually get you lore. It has just been turn after turn after turn. Jonathan has had to wipe David's board, and every single turn after that, he just comes back and there's 2 or 3 more characters in play. We see this evasive Tinkerbell being played. It's a card that you have to answer. It has 2 lore, 3 willpower, evasive. The evasive Sisu we have isn't going to do much against it unless we can bump it up with this Vitalosphere potentially, give it some extra strength and challenge it. But even if David's able to only get 2 lore out of these cards, every character that he plays with 2 lore on it, if he can get that, it's not going to be very long before he can just close out the game to 20 before Jonathan can fully recover.
Yeah, really important brawl there. I think Jonathan is close to pivoting this game, but David going up to 15 does get critically close to that 17, does have 4. We have 8 ink. So isn't able to do a Goat bounce Goat potentially off the top in a single turn quite yet. see what the draw is. I mean, the scariest thing is that this Diablo, even when you deal with it, is just going to draw another card. So you can't only play the role of the controlling player in this game. If you're Jonathan, you also need to pivot and put pressure on, because David's just threatening that bottom. Yeah. Ooh, that is probably not the one you wanted to find.
No, especially with Diablo and Magic Broom here, both not having very much willpower to work with. This Bell Accomplished Mystic, usually a very powerful card in these Amethyst mirror matches, being able to move damage around from these evasive characters challenging each other, unfortunately isn't going to be too useful here. We're not going to be able to move any damage off of our own characters. We are going to banish the Magic Broom and draw a card when Bell Accomplished Mystic is played, see if we can find another out or something that we can do. I don't think we did, though.
Finds a 4-cost Genie, is not able to play it off the back of that Bell. We're going to see the power of Ruby Sapphire here as it closes out the game, 8-13. Ruby Sapphire definitely in control.
Also back in a position where we don't really want to quest with anything if we're David. Give Jonathan that option to bring back actions with Maui Half Shark. David might have to find a way to get rid of that, or just find a way to win in one turn. Be particularly difficult from this position.
Interested to see if Jonathan can find something that quests for a little bit more than one here to start adding a bit more pressure to the board.
I do see a Pirate's Life in hand as well, which is a particularly important card against these matchups where your opponent's the aggressor, which is most of them if you're playing Ruby Sapphire. But basically, these Amethyst decks can be super scary as they get closer and closer to 20 because of things like the White Rose and Merlin Goat being able to finish the game out without really a way to stop it at all. We can get a couple Pirate's Life being sung, especially with the Maui, and we see it being done here. David has to lose 2 lore. You gain 2 lore. That's a 4 lore difference. And then Maui Shark can bring that back. Anytime he's able to challenge a character, can bring that card back. You can play it again, build a 4 lore deficit again. And I think this is how Jonathan is going to be able to catch up without actually committing very high lore questing characters onto the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels like the Pirate's Life is really what cemented the lead here, able to take David down to lore as well to keep him off of Goat range, which he honestly wasn't even very close to. But it really cements this win here for Jonathan. Now he's got to go through the motions. Not much David can do on his end. Those 2 Genies are threatening 5 lore if Jonathan can't do anything about this.
Jonathan can find a Pirate's Life here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Would that be exact? Up to 20? Can find a way to gain lore this turn. Jonathan can take this game immediately. Looks like he's digging for something with these visions of the future. Digging 5 cards deep. Can choose one of them and put them into his hand.
Go for the 5th card there as well.
Okay, looks like we're just questing out here.
So players are taking a look through each other's discards just to get information. Important as you head into. All right, so what do you think you're looking for in the opening hand here if you're on the Ruby Sapphire end?
I think Ruby Sapphire, you're looking for any way to interact. Well, first of all, priority number 1 is ramp on turn 2. You want to find a Tipo, you want to find a Sail the Azurite Sea. It'd be great if you can find a turn 1 item like an ice block or a popsicle, but I think your number 1 priority has to be that ramp, because if you don't, then David has an opportunity to play something like a triple 1-drop opener, right? 1 drop on turn 1, 2 1-drops on turn 2, and it doesn't take very long for that deck to get close to 20 like we've talked about before, and get to a point where David could finish the game before Jonathan can actually start. After that, I'd be looking for early ways to interact, things like Brawl, things like Sisu, Daring Visitor, just ways that I can keep David from getting to 20 and sort of push myself to the late game.
Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed because I don't remember the hypergeometric math off the top of my head. Assuming that Jonathan is playing 60 cards, having 8 copies of turn 2 ramp, it has to be almost guaranteed at this point, looking at that many cards, that you have options to look at so many cards in the sort of sculpting phase of Lorcana. I imagine with 8 copies of turn 2 ramp that you're pretty much going to find it every single time.
I think Jonathan is putting away 5 cards, maybe 4 there. It looks like he's only keeping 2, but I only see 4 cards. Might be 1 stacked on top of each other. Anyway, putting back a lot of cards, looking for stuff. We see double popsicle, 2 Tipos, so he has. Oh wow, yeah, he has.
He does have turn 2 ramp.
Maybe too much ramp at this point. But Jonathan is going to start off with a Tipo, going into the Inkwell and a popsicle, drawing a card, passing it on to David.
Another popsicle in hand as well. And that does have access to the 3-cost uninkable Sisu as well. We saw how impactful it could be against something like a Genie on the opposing side, leading with a Diablo here for David.
I'm eager to see if we play the Tipo out here to try to stop the character, or if we play the Sail of Azurite Sea so that we can play the Popsicle on this turn. Because you play Tipo, you can just put a card from your hand into your Inkwell, but it enters Exerted. Versus Sail the Azurite Sea, you can put a card from your hand into your Inkwell, and you can use it this turn. As we're able to see here, Jonathan's able to get that second Popsicle out, continue to put cards into his hand, getting rid of all of that turn 2 ramp that he was looking for.
Yeah, really interesting line, actually. It's just going to be a Chernobog's Followers for David. That cannot be the turn 2 that you were really looking for there.
No, I think you're really looking, if you're going to play a 1-drop on turn 2, I think you want to play 2 of them, especially in this matchup. So really unfortunate for David here, not having that play to go really wide. Jonathan playing the Grammatala, being able to look at the top 2 cards of the deck, choose one and put the other at the bottom, putting another body on board, a pretty good body, a 3/3, 1 lore is going to allow Jonathan to challenge to pretty much anything that David is questing with and playing. See if David decides to quest with the Chernobogs. He does quest with the Diablo, drawing a card, or sorry, not drawing a card, gaining a lore, and then passing it on to Jonathan.
Benja, how common is Benja in the Steel Amethyst list?
What set are we in, Brendan?
To be fair, I mean, you show up to a tournament that's 32% Ruby Sapphire. I think that you put the right tech card in your deck.
Yeah, definitely trying to play around those lucky dimes that they find, and of course, all of the other items like Ice Block that we see, popsicles, etc., can really disrupt a Ruby Sapphire player. That is really using Hiram as their primary draw engine. If you can disrupt that, then you can maybe buy enough time to win the game before they get going.
Yeah, I feel like David accurately predicted the metagame to bring in, not only bring in the Steel deck, but to also have a copy of Benj in the deck. Shows that he was prepared for this kind of Ruby Sapphire representation. Ruby Sapphire has diversified away from the Lucky Dime all in as sort of the win condition, but we still see 1-ofs of Lucky Dimes and sometimes 2-ofs in a lot of these lists.
David finding that Genie as well on turn 4, allowing to draw a card, evasive, 2 lore. Of course, we have the evasive Sisu in play, but he's quite a bit of strength away from banishing the Genie. I don't even think a Vitalosphere would actually banish it if we had one in play, because it only gives +2 strength. So might be an issue, but we do find the Maui Shark coming into play. That is going to stop the Genie from doing anything, and we're able to combo it here with the Pirate's Life and the Sing Together mechanic, being able to use Sisu, Daring Visitor, and Grammatala to sing the 6-cost song, gaining Jonathan 2 lore, forcing David to lose 2 lore.
So now what do you do if you're David? Like, it feels like you can't quest. You have to get rid of the Maui Shark first, because if you don't, that Maui's going to get those cards back from the discard and just accrue more value. Such a threatening 6-drop that also happens to have evasive and just deals with the other most powerful cards in the format, it feels like.
Yeah, it's definitely a card that has been giving David some trouble from last game, this game as well. We don't have any cards like Along Came Zeus that we could use to quickly deal with this Maui Half Shark. I think we're going to have to resort to just playing out to this board, hope that we can find some of the steel removal by drawing a couple cards.
What are your thoughts about the second ability on Maui Half Shark? Because I already feel like 6 cost, 7/5, inkable, evasive, recur things out of the discard. Very, very good card. But now, also when you play an action, gain 1 lore.
You just immediately gain a lore. Yeah, it puts, we are watching how powerful that specific ability is, right? Because Jonathan can sort of keep some of his characters ready. He can sort of be in a position where he can always respond to David while also progressing his win condition. He can continue to play cards like Vision of the Future. He can play cards like Sail the Azurite Sea. Or if he has cards like Pirate Life, he can continue to utilize these cards to put him in better positions without honestly risking all that much and continue to gain lore the whole time.
See the Chernobog's library sort of combo here, drawing 2 cards, does find Along Came Zeus off the top, which is going to be a potentially good answer to this Maui Half Shark.
I think so. We have the Genie in play that can sing it as well. Very quickly, deal 5 damage to Maui, get it off the board, gives us the opportunity to start actually exerting our characters without being too scared. We are going to move this Magic Broom to the library as well. Interested to see if we'll banish it. We're going to quest with the Broom.
Have to imagine we will, just considering how much value we're going to get out of that. Drawing 2 additional cards. We're seeing the power of the library engine here. I feel like that Along Came Zeus, which is such a good draw here for David. Now being able to answer this Maui Half Shark. Go ahead and sing, get rid of that. So much back and forth in these games.
Yeah, really great for David there, able to find the Along Came Zeus. Also have the Strength of Raging Fire, I was going to say, but it looks like we're going to go ahead and use that to banish the Sisu. We don't want Jonathan to shift onto this Sisu the next turn, but Sisu of Daring Visitor, of course, is also evasive. It could cause a couple problems, but...
What do you think the best card Jonathan could have here is? Because I think it might be Tamatoa.
Yeah, Tamatoa is pretty good here. It's going to allow us to bring back a Popsicle from the discard, reuse that Popsicle later, draw a card.
I mean, Jonathan would have had almost no cards in hand without that Tamatoa. Such an important card to have here. Still potentially behind. I mean, like we said in the past, David does not have a great way to deal with this card specifically, not having access to things like Be Prepared or Lady Tremaine. Not that Tremaine would impact this board too much, but something that Steel struggles with, particularly something like 5/8.
Yeah, a very large card. Difficult to get rid of for any cards in Steel. Also, David just hasn't gotten a lot of lore. Like at this point in the game, I would want David to be a lot further along towards his win condition because there's so much back and forth. You know that the more cards that Jonathan draws, essentially any Ruby card that he draws is going to banish something on your board. Jonathan, I mean, the library might help him tick up along a little bit, gaining that extra lore at the start of your turn. And we have the evasive Genie, right? Like Tamatoa is an evasive, so theoretically Genie can quest for 2 if it survives, but I think that's the issue is it going to survive until the next turn?
Interestingly, I think that if Tamatoa had not been the play for Jonathan, David would have been in a position to actually attrition Jonathan out throughout this mid game, due to having access to the library and those, just the rest of the cards in Amethyst to draw additional cards. Of course, has access to friends on the other side as well. Probably would have been at like 6-7 cards in hand to Jonathan's 1 or 0 at that point, but now it's coming down to a bit of a race because this Tamatoa is just going to generate so much value. Still, we see David on the gas pedal here, getting up to 9 lore.
Moving the Genie to the library as well, knowing that that's essentially the target on board. That's the thing that you want to banish. We do see a big Sisu in hand as well. I think we have enough ink to play it this turn if we want to.
I think we only have 8 though, so are we going to gamble on the Popsicle? It feels like the big Sisu is pretty impactful here, though. It's actually going to stop potentially 5 lore. Oh, so
we are going to play the Popsicle.
We don't need to find the Inkable here, and we do find it in the form of Maui Half Shark, potentially a card we would have wanted to play as well. An option to potentially play that. But that, with access to the Ice Block here...
Could also quest with Tamatoa this turn if we banish a Popsicle and then bring it back using that to ink. I didn't see that line, but I see it now.
Yep, that does make it guaranteed, right? So it wasn't much of a gamble. And that probably will be the correct play, just considering how much value this Maui Half Shark can get. And there we go. We do see that Ice Block activated, and it's going to be a 3-for-1 here for Jonathan Martinez off the back of that 8-cost Sisu.
David will get to draw a card from the Genie being banished at the library and a card from the Diablo being banished as well. So there's something I'm so impressed with in this Amethyst Steel deck is it feels like no matter how many times Jonathan's able to deal with their board, he just constantly has cards in his hand that he can continue to follow up with. I really like seeing those Maui Foxes for David as well. We could potentially start bouncing this goat back and forth, trying to push ourselves closer to 20. Although I believe Jonathan does have a Pirate's Life in the discard, and we know we have that Maui Half Shark in hand as well. Great thing about the bounce package, though, is you never really have to leave anything exerted to utilize it, so...
Yeah, these 2 Foxes, I think, are looking fantastic at this moment. Let's see what David can do here.
Might sing Friends with Goat.
Yeah, I imagine that is going to be the play here. Just need more card selection.
We're going to challenge the Tamatoa here, putting 4 damage on the Tamatoa, banishing the goat, drawing a card from the library.
Does find Strength of the Raging Fire. That's got to be the worst draw on the deck.
Yeah, not a great draw. I mean, we have 2 Foxes in play. We can't play those unless there's another character on the board. We're going to ink our friends on the other... play the friends on the other side to draw more cards.
Let's find a Rabbit and a Broom. Drink available. Believe that David has not inked yet. We're going to ink that Elsa. Play the Magic Broom, and then here's the Monoman Fox as well. Going to get rid of that Tamatoa. We see how many hurdles David has to jump through to get rid of something like a Tamatoa.
Still have a Sisu on board as well. There's the Hiram Flaversham off the draw. Going to let Jonathan banish Popsicle, get that draw engine in play if we want to use that this turn. It looks like we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, two Maui half sharks in hand and a vision of the future. Gives us plenty of access to the rest of our deck and our discard, essentially.
We don't even need to dig through the deck because we have some of the best cards in the game in our hand right now in form of two Maui half sharks.
And this is definitely a board where if I'm David, I'm looking at it and just my anxiety is going a little high at that point. How am I going to deal with all of these big threats? Sisu questing for 3. Now we have Shark evasive, can pull back those actions, gaining lore when you play actions, Hiram drawing cards through your deck.
Yeah, David does still have the Strength of Raging Fire in hand. Did ink the Elsa on the previous turn. Soon we'll see Merlin Rabbit played out here. Just get more selection. And there it is.
Find a Calhoun off the draw. Not particularly useful right now with all of the high willpower characters and difficult to challenge characters. Usually a pretty good card on the draw or to come back because of her ability to gain lore when she challenges and having resist. Going to play that Magic Broom and bounce it with the Fox. Move the Fox to the library so that we can challenge and banish the Sisu. Drawing a card when the Fox is banished because of the library. Rid of one of these threats.
Yeah, David is able to sort of make this board look a bit more manageable. That being said, I do think the Maui half sharks are very, very threatening for him at this point. He has to find something to deal with those.
And David is having to kind of do gymnastics here so that he doesn't leave any characters available for Maui to challenge into. Also dealing with just the characters on board because David has slowly but surely been getting closer to 20 with this library being on board. It's gained lore over the course of multiple turns at this point.
I think access that Maleficent as well is going to be pretty good here for Jonathan. It feels like, David at every point has to 2-for-1 himself, take a sort of tempo negative play just to try to stay in this game and keep control of the board. And Jonathan's starting to showcase the power of Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah, I mean, if we just look at his hand, he has so many answers between Brawl, Maleficent, also a McDuck Manor, I think, in there as well. We see the McDuck Manor ever enter play. That's going to be particularly difficult for David.
So McDuck Manor, do you think that's a tech card for the Amethyst deck specifically?
Could be. I find that players are playing less like
crabs.
Crabs in these Amethyst decks, which makes locations inherently a little bit better, especially ones with 9 willpower. Difficult to deal with. Yeah, and we finally see this library being challenged here. Start working on it. With that 8 willpower, it's going to survive with one remaining willpower after the Hiram. No, just the Maui challenged it.
Hiram did banish that ice block last turn. See another Merlin Rabbit here off the top. Does get a Genie.
You can see the Genie play, drawing a card.
It's funny to see the evolution of Amethyst decks where you used to have this package of cards in your deck that would draw an additional card. Now it feels like actually every single card in the deck does that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I keep looking at David's hand. I'm so used to these Ruby Sapphire matchups where once they finally take control, once we're multiple turns into this game, if they haven't lost already, usually the opponent, their hand is pretty thin or their board's pretty thin. But every single time we come back to David, it feels like he just has enough cards in hand to stay in the game.
Yeah, he has 3 cards in hand, which is effectively 6 cards in hand because they all draw additional cards. I do think at this point that Jonathan is firmly ahead in this game and is in a pretty safe spot, especially with the backup of a Maleficent Dragon in hand. It's going to clear this library on this turn as well.
Yeah, we don't have anything like a Sisu to get rid of this Rabbit and Genie specifically, but like you said, we do have this Dragon that can get rid of one of them. If we are going to go for the Genie, being the slightly more threatening for lore purposes, being
for
evasive, gaining 2 lore.
I don't feel like card advantage is as threatening as it would be at a different part of the game here for, on David's side, where, David gaining lore and potentially using something like a Goat, Bounce Goat to pull ahead is actually the real threat of Jonathan being able to potentially lose this game. David's ability to draw additional cards, especially like 1 or 2 here and there, I don't think is David's way back into this game.
Yeah, especially again, with these Maui half sharks being on board, it just makes things so tricky. And honestly, I feel like if there's any deck that can sort of combat that in a particular way, it's Amethyst because of their ability to bounce their cards back to their hand, sort of making it so you can still do something with your cards on board without giving your opponent the option to challenge, which we see David doing here, questing with the rabbit.
If I'm Jonathan, I'm super happy to see David bounce a rabbit at this point.
Yeah.
You know, because you're utilizing one of the cards in your bounce package to actually send a rabbit back when you already have 5 cards in hand. You're in a great spot if you see this, Jonathan, because what you really don't want to see is him be able to get up to something like 15, 16, 17 lore and then use those bounce cards to bounce goats.
Something interesting too here on Jonathan's side of the board. We have enough lore next turn to get up to 18, I think, if we completely quest out. 2 Mauis on board means that if we have a single action in our hand, we can play that action, immediately gain the 2 lore, and win on the next turn. So
now, once again, the second text of Maui coming into play.
Do you see the Along Came Zeus? Can't be sung by anything. We're just going to pay the 4 ink to get rid of one of those Mauis.
So we're at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. If we do find a Pirate's Life, that would be game here on the side of Jonathan. Strength of the Raging Fire finally getting inked, and we see Crab Magic Broom come down here for David. David threatening 4 on the following turn. Could go up to 18, which is effectively game, you know, considering the threat of something like a goat in hand. So both players kind of threatening a win here.
Yeah, things are actually pretty close. If I was Jonathan, I'd also be a little concerned of a White Rose, but we haven't seen any of those in David's deck yet.
Things are actually very close considering that Jonathan doesn't really have an answer here.
Yeah, it doesn't have a way to banish anything on board. 3, 4 lore just straight on the board for David here would push us to 18.
Expertly navigated by David. I thought this game was not this close a couple turns ago.
We have seen at least 1 goat, maybe 2 in the game so far, so might be a little bit difficult to find that final lore, but we do have a rabbit in hand. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have enough ink to both dig for a game win and actually play and bounce those cards.
So David, no way to draw additional cards. You know, does have, I think, most likely quite a few B-preps in the deck, but not going to have the luxury of trying to find them. The Micduck Manor will most certainly, with the characters on board, threaten game if Dave is not able to win on the final turn or on the following turn. But Jonathan doesn't want to put David in a position to win on the following turn.
Play this other Maui Half Shark.
And did we end up going to be 1 off here with the Hideaway?
Yeah, we're keeping the Hideaway, I think, so that we can maybe play it not on this turn, but the following turn, and using that second ability on Maui to burst gain some lore.
Is the Hideaway a must target or a may target?
I think it's a must target.
Yeah, so there has to be a target.
But you can. Is it opponent's inkwell? I think it's just no. It chosen item or location. So with the McDuck Manor in play, we can choose our own McDuck Manor to put into our inkwell and utilize that card.
Yeah, I think that the McDuck Manor. Okay, so he's not going to quest out with these 2.
Yeah, I don't want to give that Calhoun the ability to gain an extra lore.
Absolutely. Smart plays here by Jonathan.
Find a snake off the top for David here. That's not going to be enough.
It has the rabbit, though, to dig.
Yeah. We still have the rabbit to dig a little bit. And the broom as well to draw when we play a card. So imagine we'll see the rabbit come into play here.
And a goat would be enough because it would be 4 plus the 2. So 6 ink is all you need to find. So it needs to be a goat at the top. It's not.
It's a Smee. For Smee, that's not going to be it. We are going to banish the broom, try and find something else.
One more chance. Chernobog's Followers.
It's just going to be a Chernobog's Followers.
So how much ink do we have? We have 7.
We have 7 ink left. We do have a snake in hand that we can use to bounce a rabbit back.
Yeah.
Try to draw another card, but Jonathan's board is looking very scary right now. We have to answer it in some way by the next turn.
Yeah, you absolutely have to win this turn if you're David.
We also don't have a way to exert anything with Elsa the Fifth Spirit because we don't have her in hand that we could potentially use Calhoun with. Very, very difficult spot for David here. Honestly, I think our only option is taking out the Manor at this point.
So we take out the Manor. We're going to be... $5.19.
David.
I think David's going to see that line here.
Yeah. David playing very carefully, understanding that this is an extremely tight game. Any mistake here from either player potentially costs them the game. So we are going to start with this Madam M Fox challenging into the McDuck Manor. We're going to play the snake to bounce the fox, replay this fox. What are we bouncing? Trying to do the math. The 2 fox challenges on their own aren't going to do it because we need to do 9 damage to the McDuck Manor. The fox, of course, only challenges for 4. Even if we replay this fox this turn, we still have to swing something into the McDuck Manor.
So you bouncing the crab here? Or you bouncing the rabbit?
I don't know if it does it even matter, because if we have Maui Shark in play and we leave anything exerted at the end of our turn, I guess then the Maui's not questing, so that's 1 less lure. But we could get Pirate's Life back if it's in our discard.
Yeah, but 1 less lure would matter, right? The Pirate's Life would just be enough.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe David realized that sort of partway through this. That's why we saw the hesitation.
Pulling back the snake.
So you can bounce.
Yeah.
But then I think he realized, okay, I'm 1 off in terms of removing the McDuck Manor. Okay, so it looks like David's play was to sort of attack into the McDuck Manor. Maybe thought this Monomun would clear it, bounce it back with the snake, have no exerted characters to stop the Maui from recurring that Pirate's Life, but maybe did the math wrong on that. That's why we saw the hesitation.
Yeah. He's trying to look at his hand, figure out if there's any way we can save this. Like we're going to quest with the crab again, bounce it with snake. Oh yeah, boost the fox here, so now we can get rid of the McDuck Manor. It still leaves the fox exerted though. I think separating what cards were played this turn. We know we can't quest with those.
So play out the rest of the hands. Back over to Jonathan.
All Jonathan needs is an action that he can play.
Yeah, how about a Pirate's Life?
That's exactly what we're going to find. The Maui's going to challenge the fox, bring back Pirate's Life, and Jonathan is going to take round 2 of the Disney Lorcana North American Championship.
Yeah, notably as well, Jonathan with another 2-0. We saw him with 7 points. So going into